Dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends, my name is Brenda and I will be the moderator for today's side event. First, I would like to express my gratitude to Buddhist Tzu Chi Foundation USA to organize this event and for inviting Taiwan Daling Buddhist Tzu Chi Hospital, World Wildlife Fund, Bergreens and Green Rebel, Good Food Fund to participate in 2022 Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainability Development site event. So today we are going to discuss a very important issues, worldwide issues on resilience towards future pandemics through food system. As we know, COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerabilities of our food systems during a global crisis. And in developed countries, food processing centers are forced to open despite outbreaks within the plants, threatening the health and safety of workers and the integrity of food. Millions of animals are slaughtered needlessly and wasted because it is more cost-efficient to slaughter them than to continue raising them. And therefore, farmers facing economic hardships require extensive assistance to continue their operations. So, food shortages in vulnerable regions of the world become a worldwide spread issue as elements of global supply chains are halted and delivery transportation services become overwhelmed. So these sessions, we will explore the effects of COVID-19 and the food system, which we attempt to find solutions in this future global crisis. So by drawing upon the lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, we hope to develop key insights and a strategy for cross-sector collaboration necessary for food systems transformations towards resiliency and sustainability. So this session will indicate a great example of partnership in the global cause and to raise more confidence in the 2030 agenda implementation. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please allow me to introduce our speakers for today's event. They were based on their expertise and to share with us from their point of view, how do we tackle the issues of food climate change? So now we first have Dr. Lin Min-nen. He is a Vice Superintendent on Daling Tzu Chi Hospital. Hi, Dr. Lin. Yeah. Okay.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. Dr. Lin is currently the Vice Superintendent of Daling Tzu Chi Hospital, and he has a master's degree in public health and also in charge of green hospital programs at Daling Tzu Chi Hospital. And he won a gold medal in Leadership of Healthcare Climate Change Challenge 2020 by Global Green and the Healthy Hospital Network. And we have Ms. Helga Angelina Jayadi. She is a CEO and co-founder of Bergreens and Green Rebel. And Helga Angelina is an impact entrepreneur and health and environmental advocate. She co-founded Bergreens and Green Rebel. This is to raise and aim to revolutionize the food system in Asia to be helpful for consumers and compassionate for all beings and environmental sustainable. Next, we have Ms. Maggie Lee. She is from Asia Pacific Regional Lead for Global Seafood Traceability World Wildlife Fund. So Ms. Maggie Lee is currently working at the Asia Pacific Region Lead for Global Seafood Traceability for WWF and lead for the Plastic Global programs. And also she has been managing marketing transformative projects aiming to enable sustainable sources and consumption in the Asia Pacific in her three latest roles at WWF. Last but not least, we would like to welcome Mr. Huiyu Ouyang. He is the Food Policy Officer from Good Food Fund from China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation. As a youth chair, he leads the China Action Hub for the United Nations Food System Summit Action Track 2, which is a long-term collaboration mechanism launched by Good Food Fund, and also focuses on policy innovation, business settings, and youth empowerment, last but not least, public engagement. So without further ado, let us welcome the first speaker of today. And we would like to invite Ms. Maggie Lee from WWF. So Ms. Maggie, would you like to share with us the best strategies you have seen during COVID-19 pandemic, and how can we reform the food system? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the kind introductions, Brenda, and also for inviting me to this event. With COVID-19, many of us, especially in the Chinese-speaking world, understand that this disease could very well be something that is foodborne, meaning that the disease has been passed on from animals to human beings through eating meat. This is still a speculation at best, and that's really what science does. We speculate using best evidence. And so with food traceability, this is actually a very good hand to tackle any of these problems with foodborne illnesses. Just like when we eat seafood, and then maybe if the next day you have stomach aches or if you have diarrhea, then you can actually trace back to what did you eat yesterday? And when you tell people that you've eaten seafood, then usually they would say, oh, maybe it's that, right? So you can trace back to quite a lot of foodborne illnesses. As a food scientist from my previous background working in restaurants and supermarkets, this is really what we do. We try to find evidence and we try to prevent the next problem coming from food. I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Maggie. I think we have heard from you just now from your point of view is that food system must have evidence-based tracking in order to know that whether eating seafood is bad or not. But however, I think most of us are from different expertise regions. So I would like to invite Mr. Hui Ouyang from Good Food Front. What do you think the best strategies you have seen from COVID-19, and how do Good Food Fund reform the food system? Thank you. The time is yours.
Thank you, Brenda. And if I can share my screen. Thank you. I will share some experience based on our wet market project in the aftermath of the COVID outbreak, especially with the first identified case association with a wet market in Wuhan. Many media from the US contacted us with the interview question, when will China put a ban on wet markets? In many emerging economies in the global south, the modernization of food supply is characterized by supermarkets replacing traditional food markets. And China is also experiencing the rise of supermarkets. However, for Chinese urban population, wet markets maintain the primary source of fresh produce, including vegetables and fruits. And wet markets secure access to affordable food, especially for the low-income households, and a diverse and balanced healthy diet. So, and also wet markets bear other social and recreational functions and constitute a critical element that enriches community life. They also plays an important role in improving the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of farmers and food system workers. In July 2020, a report preventing the next pandemic was released by UNEP and CGIAR. Among the 7 human-mediated factors, which are mostly likely driving the emergence of zoonotic diseases, there are increasing human demand for animal protein and unsustainable agricultural intensification. The intensification of agriculture and in particular of domestic livestock farming results in large numbers of genetically similar animals, which are vulnerable to the transmission of diseases. Plus, animals are being kept in close proximity to each other and often in less than ideal conditions. These are all promote the transmission of zoonotic diseases, and the growing need for feed is driving deforestation, which increase human exposure to the risks. In China, the meat intake of urban residents are over 3 times compared with the recommended level of the dietary guidelines, and few effective policy interventions are in place to curb the rising trend. So we see a vicious circle. Unhealthy eating not only damages personal health, but also brings biodiversity breakdown, climate emergency, and the outbreak of zoonotic diseases, and which in turn poses challenges to the operation of wet markets and leads to the close down of wet markets, which are actually healthy food supply and safeguards for household food security. The COVID crisis demonstrates how urgent our food system transformation is, and its goal should be to promote well-being and ecological sustainability. Therefore, we proposed the concept of WET market, while WE and T stands for well-being, ecology, and transformation. We look forward to working with multi-stakeholders to promote the transformation of the wet markets towards a healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable urban food system hub, and developing a holistic approach for urban food governance. This slide shows our approach to impact. We have prepared a wet market guidebook, which provides decision makers, managers, and designers with a holistic approach to understand wet markets and guidelines to redesign them into WET wet markets, including insights on how wet markets can be complemented by and co-evolve with other food retail outlets, innovations on functions, business models, and governance models, etc. And second, due to the lack of a food system approach, relevant government departments and other stakeholders used to work in silos. We facilitate dialogues at many levels to strengthen connections and collaborate with EAT and the Resilience and Sustainable Development Program at the University of Cambridge to design a policy bootcamp to convene multi-stakeholders to co-create systemic solutions. It is hoped that such events can further stimulate change in mindsets and local food governance. And here is a framework for a discussion at our policy bootcamp preparatory workshop last week, where we engaged partners in Nanjing and experts from China and abroad to identify barriers and enablers of innovating wet markets to promote healthy diets. In Nanjing, we collaborate with key actors, including semi-government industry associations and a leading company in the investment, development, operation, and management of wet markets to run the policy bootcamp to develop solutions that have the potential to be applied on the ground. And we hope that such a collaborative model in Nanjing can be further replicated and the impact can be scaled and ultimately to provide reference to higher levels of policymaking processes. And I think I'll shut up here. In one word, the upgrading and transformation of wet markets are very important for resiliency toward future pandemics. Thank you.
Oh, it's a very good sharing and having the good practices to be in China, especially we know that China has more than 1.4 billion people. So if we are able to categorize food supply and replace the traditional practices, I think we can save a lot of food and of course reduce wastage. But of course, having supermarkets to replace the wet markets, I think it will also cost smaller retailer being economy effect. But I think this is a question that we can think of it. And with the increase of meat consumption, we must think of the well-being of the transformation of food system. Thank you so much, Mr. Ouyang. I think that is a very great discussion. And now we would like to have Ms. Helga, private sector in plant-based industry. Helga, the time is yours.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And I guess I just would like to, say my appreciation towards the previous speakers. I didn't expect that, everyone was gonna be so bold and direct about talking about the facts. And so actually some of the content I was planning to share are a bit similar. So I'm going to skip some and I guess give a little bit of more context on the Indonesia context and what I do. So I think the previous speakers have highlighted these three, the first three, key factors to zoonosis virus emergence, right? I think I would like to add on the topic by saying that, climate change is actually creating an environment where zoonosis virus transmission will happen faster. And a lot of climate and public health scientists have projected that the next pandemic could very much likely be related to antibiotic resistance. And to give a bit of context, 70% of the antibiotics production in the world is used for livestock, and humans have been unknowingly consuming antibiotics through eating animal protein. And therefore, in the younger generations, we've seen, some people who were given antibiotics, but the bodies weren't responding to the antibiotics the way it should be because they've been consuming, unknowingly a high amount of antibiotics from animal protein. I think I would like to also share a research that I came across last year about the impact of different diets to the severity of COVID symptoms. So there was this study that did a population-based case control studies in 6 countries, and they found very interesting results. That number one is that plant-based diet practitioners have 73% lower odds of having moderate to severe COVID symptoms, so they recover better. And then pescatarian diet practitioners have 59 lower odds of moderate to severe COVID-19 severity. Whereas people who consume a lot of high animal protein and low carbohydrates have greater odds of moderate to severe COVID-19. So from health perspective, I think there have been also a lot of nutrition studies that have linked, that increasing plant protein, especially to replace red meat, is good for you, is good for our longevity, and how climate change is heavily impacted by our food choices also. So I think the previous speaker has mentioned something that was so important in the Chinese context, but coming from Indonesia, is sharing the same context also. I think Southeast Asian countries, especially Indonesia, we are at this pivotal moment where at the moment we consume low meat on average because there's a lot of people in poverty, but we also saw a trend that the richer we've become, the more meat we eat. And so the question is, how can we, I think there is an intervention needed to educate the public that the more money you have doesn't mean that you need to eat more meat to get the nutritious food, to have like a better nutrition status, but they actually need an education on what a healthy balanced diet should be and different alternatives of protein that is not only healthy for us, but also sustainable. So this is the Indonesia context. I took this research from Eat Lancet study. And so I think when we look at the G20 countries, this is like the red dotted graph is the limit of the planet. And the current consumption is the dark blue color, and then the lighter blue is showing the national dietary guideline. So what we can see here is that we have been over-consuming red meat and sugar and eggs, and we are kind of at the limit of dairy because, you know, like a lot of Asian customers are lactose intolerant, so that's pretty natural. And what I would like to highlight also is that we definitely underconsume a lot of nuts, legumes, fruits, vegetables, and fish. And in an Indonesia context, like the numbers are even, you know, lower. We are like red meat wise, we are kind of like at the maximum limit, but definitely we need to increase legumes, fruit, vegetables, and nuts. I think most of the participants here are probably aware that, you know, like a plant-centric diet or a plant-based diet would reduce our individual carbon footprint. And I would like just to draw the attention to this. So I really like the solution that is proposed by Eat Lancet. So Eat Lancet is recommending a planetary healthy plate, right? Where 50% of the plates comes from vegetables and fruits, and then carbohydrate comes from whole grains, and then a higher proportion of our protein comes from plants, and a lower proportion of our protein should come, well, optionally come from animals. And so I think a planetary healthy diet is a predominantly plant-based diet. There have been many diets that are aligned with this Eat Lancet guide. And I think any intervention from be it, you know, healthcare professionals that educate the consumers, food producers, people in government that regulate food system that can promote this diet to be absorbed by the mainstream population, I think is a very great solution. You know, not only to prevent climate change, but also to prevent the future pandemics. Because I see there is an interlinked relation between, you know, like the healthy diet for humans and environment, and that can help us prevent future pandemics. So globally, and it is also data from Eat Lancet. This is how our food production needs to change in the future, you know, like a lot more vegetables, fruits, vegetables, legumes, and nuts, and definitely a lot less dairy. And where I'm coming from, so I started a startup called Green Rebel. So Green Rebel is a, you know, like an Indonesian-born food tech startup that makes plant-based meat, chicken, and cheese. And the notion is that while I'm advocating for people to eat whole legumes a lot more, you know, like we have amazing tofu, tempeh, soybean, mung bean, and all kinds of beans that we have been eating for centuries in Asia. But people, especially urban customers, have tried meat and like the taste of meat and dairy products, they need a transition food. And my mission with Green Rebel is to democratize plant-based meat and dairy alternatives, so people first like the taste of plant-based proteins, and therefore they can transition towards a more plant-centric diet. So I guess that's about, you know, like what I can share about the Indonesian context and what I do. Thank you.
Well, this is a wonderful presentation from Helga. And I think it's like your opinions and your expertise is totally different from our first speaker, Maggie, and Mr. Ouyang. As because we are talking about food chain supply, and Indonesia is one of the biggest Asia population, about 273.5 millions. Imagine from your first introduction, 70% of the antibiotics is used in livestock. So how can we balance the nutrition and protect humans' food chain? I think for the time being, we cannot have a win-win situation. But having to say from the plant-based perspective, I think, yes, the lesser meat we eat and if we were to promote plant-based diet, the environmental will be better, and we can leave the earth a healthier space for our next generation. And of course, let us hear from Dr. Lim Min-nan from Tzu Chi Darling Hospital, and his expertise is also on plant-based diet. So Dr. Lin, would you like to share with us your thoughts, and of course to talk about how can we achieve a better food system in COVID-19 pandemic? The time is yours. Dr. Lin, can you hear us? Okay, so before Dr. Lin comes in,
Okay.
oh, okay, thank you,
Can you hear
Dr.
me?
Lin.
Okay. All right.
Yes, we can
Yeah.
hear you. The time is yours.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Brenda, for the invitation. I would like to share with you as a physician now in the COVID-19 pandemic, as a healthcare professionals, we now under a dollar pressures in carrying the patients contract with COVID-19. But is there any solution besides treatment? I think that the food system is a very good, how to have a better food system is a very good solution in COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a strategy. There's strategy as a physician. We know that eating a dietary habit is one of the factors that influence the human body very much. But in a COVID-19 pandemic, how can we advise our patients to eat, or how the dietary pattern influence the disease? Yeah, there's some evidence, and previous speakers have shown that there's some evidence. But what we have to do is that we have to spread the evidence, increase the awareness of the healthcare professionals and general population. And as you know, that healthcare professionals mostly not trained well with nutrition. And so maybe they're wrong recommendation for the patient with some non-communicable diseases. And in this COVID-19 era, there's some evidence showing that for preventing or for these are all scientific evidences. Plant-based diet is better in preventing COVID-19. And also when you got COVID-19, plant-based diet is better in preventing the happening of severe cases. We don't have good treatment for COVID-19 until now, but if you adopt plant-based diet, it is even better compared with some medicine. Yeah, I think that the research has been shown for plant-based diets, pescatarian diet, and COVID-19 severity. This is in V&J Nutrition. Yeah, so as you can see, for plant-based diet, compared with low carbohydrate, high animal protein diet, these are all better in contracting moderate to severe COVID-19 disease. And there is also another prospective study compared with diet quality and risk and severity of COVID-19. This is a prospective cohort study. It is released in 2021. As you can see, if we adjust the hazard ratio for COVID-19 risk and severity according to high plant-based diet index score, the first one is COVID-19 risk, and or COVID-19 test positive COVID-19 risk, and also the third is comparing the severity of COVID-19. As you can see, it can prevent the risk in contact with COVID-19 by reducing like 10%. If it is high plant-based diet index diet, it will prevent like 10% contracting COVID-19. For test positive, it will prevent like about 20%. But for the severe cases, it can even reduce around more than 40% of severe cases. It is better than some medicine if you got contracted with COVID-19. If you are vegetarian, you adopt a plant-based diet, so the outcome will be much better. Especially for people with high socioeconomic deprivation. If compared with low socioeconomic deprivation, that is mean high socioeconomic status. If the risk of low socioeconomic deprivation, that means healthy, educated, and then the odds is 1. If you are a high socioeconomic depression, if you're not that good in good financial status, or poor, or the food is not good, so the odds will be higher. So although that will change the status, the severity of COVID-19, but also especially for high socioeconomic deprivation. So if you got contracted with COVID, then if you take a high protein plant-based diet, then it will reduce the severity when you got COVID-19, or reduce the risk of getting COVID-19. So this is a meta-analysis. Risk factors for critical and mortal COVID-19 cases. Male, age, and smoker. These are unmodifiable risk factors. A smoker is a behavior risk factors. But for these diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular diseases, these are we call non-communicable disease. That is highly related to the diet pattern you take. So as for patient with diabetes, yeah, the chance will be 3.68 times become critical or mortal. And for hypertension, it will be like 2.27 times. With CV diseases, more than 5 times. So also, we know that plant-based diet is better for reducing the comorbidity, because these comorbidity will become risk factors of critical and mortal COVID-19 cases. And then in COVID-19 pandemic, there's some lifestyle change. Like this paper shows that the impact of COVID-19 lockdown on snacking habit, fast food, and alcohol consumption. There is a tendency towards increase in snacking as well in alcohol consumption. So also COVID-19 lockdown will have some back effect on body weight. As you can see, BMI increased during COVID-19 lockdown. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, if you, because of being locked down, so you don't have much chance to exercise or some outdoor activities, so you will drink more alcohol, and then your BMI will increase. It will in turn also influence the mobility or mortality of contracting COVID-19. It will have a bad influence. So this is the slides from John Sabate in his textbook Environmental Nutrition. As you can see, for red meat, these are different kind of non-communicable diseases, such as coronary heart disease, stroke, cardiovascular diseases, cancer mortality, or cause mortality. Down to the bottom, these are all plant-based diet. So as we can see, there's so many evidences showing that plant-based diet is good for health, especially in COVID-19 pandemic. So I think that one of the best strategy is talk to the patient, talk to the people that, especially in this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, we need to adopt more plant-based diet. Thank you.
Wow, that is a wonderful comment based on Dr. Lin's research. I think it's very amazing. And of course, having to work from the health sector to introduce plant-based diet to the public, I think there are many challenges ahead. But I have read before your research, it was quoted as that the flat teeth and long intestine of human body is more like the characteristics of herbivorous animals. And also through your research, we understand that significantly that it is helpful to mitigate risk of all sorts of chronic diseases and deterioration of climate environment if we promote plant-based diet. Okay, so it was a very wonderful session for the first session, and I realized that from our four speakers, there is a common point, which is evidence-based practice. So moving forward, let us come to our intervention session 2. Moving forward from the pandemic, how can we work together to build a more sustainable and resilient food system along with preventing the next pandemic? So now, can we invite, may we invite Dr. Lin to share your point of view? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. So I'll keep talking about for preventing the next pandemic. Actually, previous speaker, I think it's Ouyang, has already talked about where are the viruses from. From the year 1976, there we call new emergent and re-emergent infectious disease in the possible host. And then 76% are zoonotic disease. In Ebola, 1976 is from bats. And then HIV is from chimpanzee in Africa. And then we have H5N1 avian flu. We have SARS, COVID-1 in the 2002, and also a swine flu, MERS, H7N9, and then there's so many. As you can see, we have 3 bats here. So these are all due to the invasion of human beings to the natural inhabitants of wild animals. So for preventing the next pandemic, the first thing is that we have to do is to respect for the nature. Yeah, I read a book last year by David Coleman, Spill Over. Yeah, I highly recommend you if you. I think that maybe many of you have already read this book before, but if you haven't read it before, yeah, I highly recommend you to read this book. And yeah, the David Coleman said that it is in the year 2013. He said the next big human pandemic, the next disease cataclysm, perhaps on the scale of AIDS or the 1918 influenza, is likely to be caused by a new virus coming to human from wildlife. So we now in human body, we isolate 7 strains of COVID-19, COVID coronavirus. The first 4 viruses just cause common cold, but for COVID, SARS-CoV-1 and MERS-CoV and SARS-CoV-2, these coronavirus, the new coronavirus become a zoonotic disease. It will cause the mortality of human beings. But do you know that there are still more than 1,400 strains of species of bats around the world and carry more than 200 strains of coronavirus? If we can survive and we can, this COVID-19 has gone away in 2 or 3 years, but if we cannot stop our invasion to the natural habitat, how long do you think that we will get next pandemic? So in preventing the next pandemic, next deadly virus infection, I think the first things that we have to do is to respect the nature and adopt more and more a plant-based diet. It's not only good for non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, this cause a lot of diseases, but also we can cause this kind of infectious diseases, especially the zoonosis. And then besides that, if we cut the rainforest for some like raising livestock, like for bean and other things for raising the livestock, then we will increase the greenhouse gas. And some other infectious diseases like malaria, dengue fever will also cause a lot of human disease. So besides for non-communicable diseases, infectious diseases also will become severe if we we destroy the forest, invade the natural inhabitant. So I think that the best things we
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Brenda, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm being unmuted. Okay, sorry. Okay, I think from Dr. Lin's point of view, having a plant-based diet can reduce the serious cases of medical condition and have a better outcome, whether is it for deforestation issues or climate changes. But I also understand from Dr. Lin's one of his main speaking point is that we have to respect animals, because respecting animals, respecting to food system is respecting to human rights as well. Okay, so next, may we invite Helga to share with us what's your point of view based on Dr. Lin's perspective, and what are your own perspective? Thank you. The time is yours.
Yes, thank you, Brenda. I was really happy to actually listen to Dr. Lin. Like, I think Dr. Lin is the only doctor that I've met and like been speaking about this openly. But we've seen the journals also. So really excited, and I totally agree what he shared with what he shared before. I guess what I would like to add is that other than regulating the high-risk hotspots that I think has been mentioned by the previous speaker, I think integrating planetary aspect to National Health Nutrition Guide will educate the market better. In Indonesia context, our National Nutrition Guideline is actually very aligned with Lancet's Planetary Healthy Guide. We just need to highlight the recommendation to increase the plant protein proportion and lessen the animal protein proportion. And I think we have also a representation from investors' side here, which I think has been doing great. We need to get more investment in the space of alternative protein, dairy, and fat, because it is transition food. Coming from a food practitioner that started the business from zero, I was a restaurateur before I found Green Rebel. So I started a restaurant chain called Burger Greens, which is a plant-based restaurant chain. There were many challenges that we found as we scaled the business, and I think we could get some help and support to strengthen how local businesses can start a healthy and sustainable food business, and how they can scale to a larger to the next stage of their business. And of course, I think minimizing food waste is an important aspect, and anything that we can do from different types, not only food but also energy, and the way we do business, how we transition towards a more circular economy practice is important to mitigate the climate change. So I guess I just want to share to some people here and on YouTube that may not be familiar with what alternative protein is. So at the moment, there are three alternative protein. So one being the plant-based meat and milk products, the kind of things that we do at Green Rebel. So we try to mimic the taste and texture of like meat, chicken, cheese from plants. And then there is so I think this is like a short-term to mid-term kind of solution. And as the demand goes up, the prices will be more affordable. Because right now, I think the main bottleneck for people to adopt, like plant-based meat instead of animal meat-based meat is the price for certain groups. And then the longer-term innovation, there is a cell-based meat, seafood, and milk products. So basically, this is an innovation to grow meat using animal-based cells, but without the need to slaughter, and of course that therefore with a much less carbon footprint. But at the moment, this innovation is still very expensive, so it's gonna take some more years to be commercialized, like viable commercially. And then we don't need to look for super cutting edge technology for this. We have been eating this for centuries. I think what we need to change is the paradigm that tempeh and tofu is the food for the poor. It's actually the food that is super healthy, super nutritious, super eco-friendly, and it will add years to our life. So I think we need to kind of increase this status of how, like wealthy people, like anyone could source this kind of protein. And then I think there are a few things also that we can do to strengthen local supply chain of healthy and sustainable food. I think China has been doing this, and I think other countries could learn from China how we need to invest in future food, like increasing the production locally of legumes, mushrooms, algae, nuts, hydroponics, and other types of, like highly nutritious and low carbon footprint food. And then, when it comes to sustainable farming and fishing, there is a lot of capacity building that needs to be done to the local community of farmers and fishermen. Infrastructure that needs to be built so they can sell to consumers at affordable price. How we can support them in distribution of the goods. And there's a lot of local startups that have been doing this. They do like farm to table produce to an app or to an e-commerce. And then market education, which, like if we can copy what Dr. Lin is doing in Sichi Hospital to other hospitals, that's like super awesome. And then the third one is how we can increase the skills of local businesses, like to actually create food that is healthy and sustainable. It could be like a tempeh making skill. It could be producing healthy snacks, healthy beverages, and ways to preserve food naturally. And of course, from the government side, we need support in the form of regulatory approval. At the moment, it's not the easiest thing to do to get regulatory approval to sell healthy and sustainable food to the mainstream. Because, and I think we need to give a context to the regulatory approval governments that local businesses, smaller businesses have very different resources than corporates, like bigger corporations. And therefore, we need kind of like a friendlier regulatory approval for us to be able to go to market faster. And yeah, I guess these are the 4 things that I think we also need to mitigate climate change. But I'll let other speakers to explain this in more details because I think this is closer to what they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helga. I think this is so wonderful. You give us a very precise and a very concrete solutions on how can we change the alternative from meat to plant-based diet. And I just read from your company's website saying that replacing ourselves with plant-based diet, we are doing ourselves and the environment a big favor. So it is true that we need to change our diet habit and of course dining culture, but not all countries are able to follow the guidelines of plant-based diet, especially those African countries that are not able to grow vegetables, crops. So I would like to hear more about from Maggie, because she has mentioned about the seafood supply system. And I think it is very interesting because most of the Asians will prefer to eat seafood and of course meat. But how do seafood change the supply chain can adjust and help us to improve the food system towards resilient and sustainable to prevent the next pandemic? So may we have Maggie to share with us your point of view? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And it's great to hear from everybody. I'm glad I decided to save all my presentation till now because it's great to respond to what everyone has said. I've had the pleasure to actually visit 2 of the Burgreen outlets in Jakarta. So I was pleasantly surprised because my friends know that I took out meat from my diet in 2008. So they were scratching their head when they wanted to take me someplace in Jakarta, but unfortunately I don't eat meat like most of them. So they were very happy about how there's Burgreen now in Indonesia. And so every time I'm there, they usually invite me to Burgreen. So thanks for sharing your points of view, Helga. That's really enlightening. And also it's great to hear that there are business owners who are more responsible. And that's really what I do want to talk about as well. After hearing from Dr. Lin about how zoonotic diseases actually are quite prevalent if you didn't show the diagram, it wouldn't actually occur to us that there are that many now. And after we've been paying attention to, especially in Taiwan and Hong Kong, to SARS, and then now also COVID-19, this is not just a problem for a few of us, but it's a problem for the entire planet. Also sharing with you is my presentation on sustainable seafood. So just to quickly go over what this is that, and maybe sharing with you an anecdote. Speaking of vegetarianism, 3 years ago during my own wedding banquet in Hong Kong, I actually opted for a vegetarian menu. And like what Helga mentioned, tofu and tempeh used to be a food for the poor. And I was criticized quite heavily for actually removing all sorts of animal products from my wedding banquet by my relatives. It is a very solemn decision in Asia, especially when eating is a very social habit. We know that if you decide to eat, only pursue plant-based diet from now on, your relatives are probably going to think, oh, you're on diet. Why are you doing this to go on diet? You can go on diet better ways, right? So yeah, I was actually yelled at by my uncle during my wedding, and I was just telling my friend about this story yesterday. Of course, now that I'm over this, I can laugh at it, but it is a very serious decision, especially in Southeast Asia, where quite a lot of food are cooked with seafood. You may not even notice it, but for example, where I'm living in Bangkok, almost every type of dish has fish sauce, yu lu, in it. So it's really hard to avoid because you can't even see it, but then it's just blended in the condiments. And so this is also why it's important for business owners and also for us who are making a decision about what we eat, maybe not necessarily going plant-based right away. It is a big decision, as I mentioned, but also to look at if we're going to choose a food or an animal-based food for our protein source, for example, seafood, how can we actually choose so more responsibly? So just to go over a little bit is that despite our best attempts to weed out some of the carbon-heavy choices of animal protein, seafood is still one of the main sources of animal protein for all of Southeast Asia, and I can definitely say for coastal Asia as well. For landlocked regions, not so much. They do depend much more on land animal products. But seafood is actually just extremely important, not only for our own consumption, but also for the economy of Asia. But at the same time, we know that there's quite a lot of problems with our oceans now. Without going into details, there are quite a lot of facts that we cannot ignore. For example, 61% of global fish stocks are fully exploited, meaning that these populations may not bounce back. We may not be able to let them rest and allow them to come back to their full glory from before. And also 50% of the world's corals have disappeared. You may have heard of quite a lot of changes with our coral ecosystems. Many of them have bleached over time because of the heating up of our oceans due to climate crisis from our carbon emissions. And also about 50% drop in ocean diversity since the 70s. In the 1970s, that is actually not so long ago. That's only merely 50 years ago. And many of us who are still alive remember that 1970s, how it looked like under the oceans. There are quite a lot of color footage that show in the 1970s how brilliant and vibrant our oceans are compared with what they are now in the exact same locations. So this is a very stark and very gloomy fact that we need to remember, is that by choosing our animal proteins, we can avoid certain types of crises, but we do need to do so if unavoidable with responsible decision making. As I mentioned, seafood is also very important for the economy in a lot of places. It simply cannot be weeded out. So as Helga mentioned, Indonesia has been a region that traditionally thrives on quite a lot of other foods, aside from tofu and tempeh, which are also equally as delicious and very nutritious. From a food and nutritional scientist point of view, I would say that by pairing your amino acids so that you get enough of your essential amino acids, you can be equally as healthy, if not more healthy, than meat eaters and seafood eaters. But despite that fact, it is still a tradition that people in the region thrive and depend on seafood. So there are more than 120 million people just within this yellow line that actually live on catching and processing and delivering seafood in the world. So we call this the Coral Triangle, and it also happens to be a biodiversity-rich area. So just a very, very brief background about IUU seafood without going into details. IUU stands for illegal, unreported, and unregulated seafood. This is the type of seafood that we try to avoid. We don't want to get into that because it is actually very harmful for our oceans. Many people believe that what's out there in the oceans are free for everyone to grab. It was true until a point that we know that the oceans cannot sustain this type of greed. It's a very limitless greed when people decide to take resources from the planet and benefit themselves and profit from that. So this is actually a news clipping from 2020, end of this December, end of 2020, about how the Japanese legislation will actually include another law that tries to tackle IUU seafood, which is actually the worst way to harm our oceans right now, debatably. In another news clipping, this is from a little bit later last year, the US against IUU seafood. So there are quite a lot of regulations, and bigger countries that are more focused on seafood have already created regulations about how to eliminate this type of illegal seafood. At the same time, we still know that there's just a lot to be done. There's still so much illegal seafood out there that it costs the economy billions of dollars every year, because it is harmful for those who get the license, who use proper fishing gear, and who actually goes through the proper channels to apply for the rights to fish in certain areas, compared with the ones who are just going out there and grabbing this food from our ecosystems. At the same time, we still know that IUU fishing is still #1 problem for our oceans, besides other problems such as plastic in our oceans. That is which really my other focus is actually marine debris in the plastic form. As Helga mentioned, there's also quite a lot of ways that we can do that, but that's another topic for another time. So what is responsible seafood? I've been talking about this for a very long time already. Basically, it is actually just about doing the right thing, really choosing the correct types of seafood if you must eat seafood. And so it helps to reduce any negative consequences to the environment. It helps with social impact as well, because quite a lot of times illegal seafood also implies modern day slavery and quite a lot of human rights violations as well. So how do we choose responsible seafood? So this is one of the key takeaways I would like you to remember, is that there are quite a lot of certifications for sustainable seafood now. Two of them are highlighted here, MSC and ASC certified seafood. MSC goes for the wild caught seafood that you find in the oceans. ASC goes for farm seafood. So these two types of certifications are crowned as some of the pinnacles of the most responsible and sustainable seafoods. Below that would be responsible seafood. WWF and quite a lot of other organizations such as the FAO. The FAO is actually the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. They have already actually highlighted what constitutes responsible seafood. Seafood that is traceable, seafood that is actually about to be certified MSC or ASC, seafood that is in fishery improvement projects. These are all types of responsible seafood. And then later on, there's green listed seafood. Unfortunately, WWF does not yet have an office in Taiwan. I hope that in the future they would. But WWF seafood guides are available for many countries, including some of the countries that our speakers come from, such as Indonesia and China, and also Hong Kong. So these seafood guides are available free for use for everyone to peruse. And it states how we should actually buy seafood, which type of seafood can we buy, and where are these seafood available? So that you know that to avoid some of the seafood that you should avoid, and to actually only purchase the seafood that is in the green list. At the same time, there's also the avoid list. There are so many different types of seafood that are no longer sustainable. They may be in the past. We may have heard that we have tunas that are as big as half a ship. We have seen quite a lot of people who would eat whale and sharks, but unfortunately, quite a lot of those species are no longer sustainable. And so these ones right here on the right-hand side in the reverse pyramid are the ones that are less sustainable and sometimes very, very unsustainable to be avoided. And so here we can see sharks, and which is also quite common in the Chinese-speaking world. Also here in Bangkok, there's quite a lot of shark fin in banquets and also any type of celebration. It is definitely a hard choice to choose to remove shark's fin from an expensive banquet, because it also signifies how prestigious and how expensive banquets are. But of course, we no longer depend on that for our scrutiny for how good food is, because as Helga mentioned, it's not really how much you pay for the food, it's really the nutrition and also how wholesome it is that matters. So without going into a lot of details, I would like to introduce to you a concept about traceability. So it's 可追溯性. So what it is that seafood traceability, or any type of food traceability, allows for us to understand where our food is from, how it was caught or how it was harvested from either the fields or even the oceans or even rivers or ponds where fish is grown. So seafood traceability in particular is pertaining to seafood, of course. It is still currently a new concept in many parts of the world. But in one of the countries of the world, this has been ongoing for quite a long time, since the beginning of our COVID outbreak already. And that country is actually China. So China has actually imposed quite a lot of regulations that are not actually specified for frozen seafood. So right after COVID-19 outbreak, China has already started tightening their requirements for seafood traceability, especially for frozen seafood. So nowadays, if you go to any major supermarket or actually through e-commerce in China, you can already find quite a lot of good traceability systems, especially with QR codes that tell the consumers what they can buy and what the seafood is from, where the seafood is from, and which producer it's from.
Yeah, thank you.
So maybe just let me go through the last one slide, please.
Sure, no problem.
So sorry, I'd like to combine my presentation for this reason. So if you want to actually communicate your contributions and good decisions for the environment, how can you do so if you cannot prove it? So that is really the basis of traceability. And I'd just like to showcase how for WWF, we have created one outline of lists of information that should be captured and should be conveyed when seafood is being sold. So that when we need to find out, not all the time, but when we need to find out that this information is already there for us to look up. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Maggie, for your comprehensive report. I think we are hearing from both areas, you know, plant-based, marine seafoods, and etc. And of course, I really salute to your your courage decision to go for the plant-based or less meat wedding dinner, you know, because we always hear from two sides of the world, you know, some of the traditions and some of the latest practices. But from a bigger point of view is that a healthy environment that supports a sustainable ocean economy requires adequate financing and performance with the governance assistance. Okay, last but not least, can we have Mr. Ouyang Hui to share with us your point of view, and of course, from China perspective, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm very thrilled by all what the previous panelists have shared, and I would like to add the perspective of the role of young people. As I've mentioned earlier, we will run a Cambridge Policy Bootcamp to generate solutions for wet markets, and a key challenge that the bootcamp should tackle is to make young people see the wet markets as what they are, as a part of the food system solution, and to avoid the risk that wet markets are seen by something in the past that only old people make use of. It would be really the key to success to engage young people in the participatory policymaking process, as they are the largest consumer generation, as young people can jump out of the food system box and be the agents of change. And I would also like to share the Good Food Fund's work in young talent development, given that food system transformation is a nascent field in China today, with concepts like healthy and sustainable diets slowly gaining traction, and related organizations in these early stages of forming an ecosystem. We believe young talent development and polling is key to driving transformation, and the field urgently needs a platform to build capacity and match attractive practice opportunities for aspiring and promising young people to work in food systems. So we launched a young talent development project earlier this year to identify young future leaders and link organizations and companies that are deeply engaged in food systems in China. On one hand, for young people, the program cultivate and recognize young change makers through a virtual training camp. We introduce a food system approach and relevant concepts. We provide capacity building workshops, peer mentor sessions to develop job readiness, and finally provide the young participants internship positions. On the other hand, for organizations in the food space, the programs serve as a bridge to enhance the ecosystem and promote cooperation and mutual benefit among the youth community. And lastly, I want to highlight the importance of exchange of evidence, perspectives, and best practices across country borders. Especially in China, we have seen the risk of being isolated in a post-pandemic world. And that is also a huge barrier to our advocacy, plus the language barrier, social media barrier. They all make the situation worse, that young people become apathetic over the challenges that our world is facing, and any sense of a global civic duty is lost to a rising nationalism, and they just chose to stay in their own silos and comfort zones rather than working in food systems to create change. So I think we definitely need more exchange and discussions like today's event, and more collaborations at regional and global levels. And we really look forward to collaborations. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Hui, for your point of view. And indeed, transformation takes time, especially the wet market traditions and the latest food system, which call along supermarkets to share the supplies and etc. I think one of the biggest challenge that we are facing right now is that how can we introduce a good system that can be shared among the supermarkets and the wet markets, because from what I understand is that wet markets still stand a very high percentage in China. But of course, if we can focus on the food supply chain and having a stable food supply to various markets, I think maybe we can have a win-win situation or to reduce the economic loss. Okay, so right now we have a few questions that is meant for our Q&A session. Okay, let's see. Question number 1. Indeed, integrating planetary aspect to national diet guideline is something critical but lack in the system. So how can all different sectors like the medical professional, WWF, private sector in the plant-based industry, and other civil society organizations push this forward? So I think this is a very good question that we can think about. I just wonder to our 4 speakers, who would like to take up this first question? Anyone? Oh, okay, Dr. Lin, you raise your hand.
I can share that awareness is very important, because for medical students there is the International Federation of Medical Student Association. Now they are working on putting climate change issues into the medical curriculum, and also this kind of food system and nutrition. So if we start from the young generation as a medical professionals, so and then when they are well known about the importance of diet and climate change, and so maybe when they are seeing patients, when they are cooperate with other healthcare professionals or other professions, they can have a basic ideas that it is very important for climate change and also the food, because for livestock industry, it will generate 50% more the greenhouse gas. So start from the education, especially for the young generation, from the professionals.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ling, for your explanation and for your points of view. The takeoff point from your side is actually to start education from young, educating the youth or the young children right from the beginning that what is the best practices of food system for them. Okay, but I have also hear from Helga from the Burgreens and Green Rebel that you have also talked about, taking alternate proteins in replacement of the current food system. May you share a little bit of the challenges that you have faced to overcome such new system? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brenda. So I think my main challenge in Indonesia is the market education, right? So in Indonesia, we are a country where, there is a lot of wealthy people who eat animal protein on a daily basis in the cities, but we also have a lot of people, like here living in rural villages who barely have access to nutritious food. And they are they pretty much, they don't eat that much meat because, they can't afford it. Instead, their problem is like sugar and processed food, which is so cheap and widely available in their areas. So every time I spoke in like public conferences, I always got criticized that my proposed solution is something that I should do in developed countries. It's not a problem in Southeast Asian countries where most people, like in, like villages, don't even consume enough meat. So that's always the challenge. And where I come from always is, so basically the way I kind of like overcome this challenge is number one, the way I educate the market is that I promote a plant-centric diet, and my solutions is focusing on the urban customers, the ones who are actually eating a lot more like Western diets. And number two, I am trying to collaborate with different stakeholders. So, we have a great doctor in Indonesia who is part of the Eat Lancet researcher. And so basically, we're trying to collaborate on some content. Her name is Dr. Rina. She would invite me to like as a guest speaker in her University of Indonesia Faculty of Nutrition. And I would also invite her to speak in the communities of plant curious people. So like we collaborate a lot with like-minded people, with of course like the ones who are the ones who have like evidence-based background to be able to speak about this topic, because like I think I'm in a position where if I talk too much about like promoting plant-based diet, some people may portray that as a way for me to sell more products. Whereas if I, like work together with healthcare professionals who have no, financial benefits of promoting this because it's just good for public health, then the credibility and also the acceptance is much better. So that's what I've been doing, like collaborating with different stakeholders, doctors, food scientists on content, especially on market education. Yeah, like the second of, I guess like that, this is like from the market education aspect, but the most important aspect from my business is that we continually innovate to create delicious products that potentially can be more delicious than the meat itself. Because what I realized is that no matter how much we talk about the health aspect or environmental aspect of a plant-based diet, if the food doesn't taste good, people who do not do plant-based diet yet, they will not switch to a plant-based alternative. Like it has to taste better. It has to have a strong nutrition profile. It's got to have like high protein, lower fat. It's got to have like a superior nutrition profile compared to meat for these people to actually shift. So yeah, that's from me.
Yeah, thank you, Helga. I think you have raised a very important point, is that to engage different stakeholders to be in this industry so that we can industrialize the whole system. But I have understand from a representative from South Africa. She also said that growing vegetables can be a very difficult or challenges in Africa, especially when the countries which is near the sea borders. So I think this question will be very good that if Maggie can explain from your point of view, is that you have shared with us about very wonderful solutions about sustainable seafood, but how can we engage different sectors? Because you see, in today's conversation, we have like from the general and the majority point of view, which is including economy and marine life sectors, and then we have private sectors and totaling for medical sectors. So what do you think about, from your opinions, is that how can we engage all these different sectors together in a very quick and precise point of view from your side? Thank you.
Thanks for asking me that question, Brenda. So if I may actually just present the last bit of my slide, because I was about to answer that question. So we did actually ask what was the best solution. It was not just because as an NGO, we would like to put together a solution and we wanted everyone to use it. Sometimes we don't want to be too forceful. We do want to inquire what is actually the best type of solution that would work for the private sector to create a win-win situation, right? So with many years down the road, it's been 5 years since we started the first conversation, and that we did actually visit both developed and developing markets to see how we can actually help the seafood industry to move on to more traceable practices. And we are focused on traceability because we have so many other teams that are working on sustainability and helping them on board with different types of certifications and practices. And so we're talking about traceability and also information systems here. Without knowing where your food is from, we can never really trace or the zoonotical diseases, or we can never find out what is really causing any type of foodborne illnesses. And sometimes even, for example, what's happening right now, communicable diseases, right? So that's really the basis of the foundation of traceability. We need to set down the industry standards so that industry knows what to do. We can't rely on everyone doing what Bird Greens is doing, what Green Rebel is doing, in terms of actually being supporters of making the right decision for the environment and also for public health. But we need to guide them. So there's quite a lot of guidance that's necessary in terms of educating them about the planetary limitations and boundaries, and also what's going on in our ecosystems. So the really sad facts that I actually went over with you earlier in my presentation, those are really good wake-up calls for the industry to start looking for solutions. And these are some of the meetings that we've had around the world to come together with a finalized solution that we can have interoperable and verifiable traceability. So not just for seafood, but it could actually be for any type of food. We cannot rule out that any type of food system requires traceability. We need to know, for example, we mentioned palm oil earlier. Palm oil is also a highly questionable food that I've worked on before. It is plant-based. Does not mean that it is actually always healthier and always more sustainable, but technically palm oil in a nutshell is actually a very good oil for the environment because it has very high crop yields. But at the same time, we know that there's quite a lot of modern day slavery and illegal activities, especially pertaining to the top 2 countries that produce the most palm oil in the world. And so what do we do with that? We do need traceability for that as well. And so the moral of the story is that if you want to make the right decision, I'm hoping that you can also retain your evidence for that. And Brenda concluded in the first session that it's science evidence-based. And we really need to retain quite a lot of this information, even in our day-to-day logistics. And in the day and age of the internet, this is now made possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maggie, from your perspective. Yeah, I think how do we look upon all this food transformation? It has to be evidence-based, and just in your previous session, you have actually speak about this seafood traceability. I think this is one of the kind of like market solution that we are looking at it right now. Okay, to Hui Yu, what do you think from your point of view as a youth leader? How can you empower the students to launch campaigns and create challenges in their campus in China? Maybe have a little bit more opinions from your and your previous experience that you can share with us. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And I think the first step is to raise their awareness. And we have done quite a lot, like translating and introducing food system online course to university students, and like we have a podcast targeted at younger audiences to relate food system issues with what they are interested in. And I think it's also important that we provide like relevant skills and knowledge, like behavioral change. We're now organizing a nudge-a-thon, which is a hackathon on the topic of nudging students to eat healthier plant-rich diets, and we provide them with the tools, with the knowledge in nudge, and we help connect the student teams who develop solutions and the caterers and managers of their universities, so that their solution can be have the potential to be applied in their universities, so that plant-rich, delicious dishes are more appealing, so that more people may tend to choose the better choices.
Okay, thank you, Hui. Yeah, we can really see that youth can take a big part in this conversation and dialogue, and we need to provide the opportunities and build capacity. So I think today's event, I think this is so wonderful, because we are looking from different expertise, different opinions, and different sectors. So now we will now conclude with one closing remark from everyone, starting from Helga. Thank you.
I guess, if you're a consumer, choose what's best for you and the planet. And if you're a food producer, I think it's not like, I guess this goes for consumers and also food producers. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a 100 or none approach, but you can start making wiser choices step by step, as long as you're consistent and add more responsible choices in your life until you'll get there. But don't be discouraged just because you feel like you can't do it 100%. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Helga. It's just like the sensation of leaving no one behind. Thank you so much. And now maybe invite Dr. Lin for your closing remark.
I would like to share 3 sentences. We can change the world with every bite, and 1,000 miles journey begins with 1 step. Then be the change you want to see in the world. So don't be afraid. Take action. Action is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. So from your perspective, is action speaks louder than words. Thank you so much. And may we invite Hui for your closing remark?
So my call to action would be prioritize One Health, introduce system thinking, and make young people heard in policymaking processes.
Thank you so much, Hui. Yeah, it's good to have a systematical planning and proposal before we take action. I think that's a very good takeoff point. And last but not least, maybe invite Maggie for your closing remark.
Thank you. Actions definitely speak very loud, but words equally matter, because we do need the words to prove that you've actually done the action. So I would like to emphasize that we make good decisions, and please retain the proof for that.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes, indeed. We have to take in for all the challenges that we face. And of course, we have to come in from different points of views to solve the problem. A good solution is a good resolution. Okay, so we are going to end our session today. And thank you for everyone's joining. And thank you, the panelists. for your from your participation. And I would like to call for the audience that please stay tuned with us, because with the upcoming events, we would like to invite everyone again back to this session to talk about what are the next steps and the call to action. Thank you so much, everyone. Good day and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Really great meeting you all.
Thank you.
Uh,